Okay, picture this. There's a 14-year-old kid named Chris, just hanging out in his family's living room. His older brother, Jim, comes up to him with what seems like a totally innocent project. With their parents' help, Jim's putting together a family scrapbook and needs Chris to remember some stuff from when they were really little. Chris is happy to help, so he agrees. Jim reads 3 little stories out loud. Chris totally remembers the first 2: a family birthday party, a trip to Grunt. Easy stuff. But that 3rd story, it just feels off. It doesn't ring a bell at all. The story goes, "Hey, remember when you were 5 and we went to the mall? You got lost and were super scared, crying and everything. Then some old guy in a flannel shirt found you and brought you back to Mom." Chris is just confused. He's digging through his brain, searching for a file called Lost at the mall, but nothing comes up. "I don't remember that at all," he says, pretty sure of himself. Jim just shrugs it off. "No worries," he says. "Just think about it for a couple of days. It might come back to you." And since Chris is a good brother, that's exactly what he does. For the next 2 days, he keeps replaying that story in his head. He really tries to remember. He pictures the bright, crazy lights of a mall. He tries to feel that panic would feel, realizing his mom is gone. He even tries to picture the face of this nice old man. He's not just thinking, he's doing something powerful that psychologists call imagination inflation. That's when you imagine something so vividly that it starts to feel like a real memory. So a few days later, Jim asks him again, "Any luck remembering that time at the mall?" And this time, something wild happens. That blank space in his memory gets filled. "I remember now," Chris says. And he doesn't just remember a little bit, he gives all these convincing details. He describes the old man. He remembers crying. He remembers feeling so scared and then so relieved when he saw his mom. It felt like a real memory, a little scar from his past that finally healed. But here's the huge, massive problem. None of it ever happened. There was no mall trip, no old man, no getting lost. The whole story was a fake, a lie made up by his family for a crazy psychology experiment. The story of Chris is the main example from one of the most famous and unsettling experiments ever, done by the amazing psychologist Elizabeth Loftus. This lost in the mall trick was the first real proof of just how fragile and easily shaped our own life stories are. So, this brings us to the 5th episode in our investigation. We're past the simple sins of forgetting. We're even past the internal mix-ups of misattribution. Now, we're heading into much darker territory. A place where our minds aren't just a little flawed, but can actually be hijacked. A place where our memories can be shaped, changed, or even created from scratch by other people. This is the sin of suggestibility. Suggestibility isn't about a memory fading or getting the details wrong. It's about our brain's weird ability to just soak up fake information from leading questions, peer pressure, you name it, and weave it into our own life story until it feels 100% real. It's a sin where we remember something, but someone else planted it there. Our mind isn't the one to blame. It's the scene of the crime. It's like our brain is soft clay, and suggestion is someone else's hands, shaping our past into a story we never lived. The Lost in the Mall experiment is the perfect example of this. The story from Jim was like planting a seed for a new memory. Telling Chris to think about it was like watering that seed. And Chris's own brain, just trying to be helpful, did the rest. Our brains hate empty spaces, right? So when someone asks a question that makes it seem like a memory should be there, our brain will work overtime to find it, even if it has to build it from spare parts, other trips to the mall, movies he saw, faces in a crowd. And the craziest part, it felt real to Chris. The fear he remembered was real fear. The relief was real relief. His brain created real emotions for a totally fake event. And get this isn't just some weird lab experiment. It's a real weakness in how our brains are built, like a backdoor in our mental software that can be exploited. It's why the whole recovered memory thing in therapy is so controversial. It's why the way a detective asks a question can completely change what a witness remembers. And on a smaller scale, it's why you might argue with a friend about a conversation, both of you swearing you remember it perfectly, but both remembering completely different things. Your memories might have been subtly changed by what you've suggested to each other over time. So in this episode, we're going to open up the magician's bag of tricks. We'll break down the powerful techniques people use to plant fake memories. We'll figure out why our brains have this open door that lets our past get so easily messed with. And most importantly, we'll ask, can we build a fortress for our minds, a Fort Knox for our memories? Or are we all just living a life based, at least partly, on a story someone else wrote for us? Okay, so we've established that our minds are like soft clay, ready to be shaped by outside forces. The story of Chris getting lost in the mall proves that it's possible to plant a detailed, emotional memory of an event that never actually happened. It's a terrifying thought, but it's not magic. It's a science. Like any great illusionist, a person who influences memory, whether they mean to or not, says a specific set of tools and techniques. They exploit the known glitches and vulnerabilities in our brain's operating system to create a version of the past that suits their narrative. Today, we're going to pull back the curtain. We're going to open the magician's toolkit and expose the 3 most powerful tricks used to manipulate and even create memories. These aren't just theories. They are scientifically tested methods that reveal the astonishingly fragile nature of our own personal history. Once you see how the tricks work, you'll start seeing them everywhere. The first and most common tool in the kit is what we can call the leading question, or the lawyer's gambit. This is the art of asking a question in a way that subtly plants a piece of false information directly into the listener's mind. The brain, eager to be helpful and to make sense of the question, often accepts the planted detail as a fact without even realizing it. The master of demonstrating this is, once again, Elizabeth Loftus. In one of her classic experiments, she showed participants a video of a car accident. Afterwards, she split them into groups and asked a simple question about the speed of the cars. To one group, she asked, about how fast were the cars going when they hit each other. To the other group, she asked, about how fast were the cars going when they smashed into each other. Think about those 2 words, hit versus smashed. On the surface, they seem similar, but neurologically, they are worlds apart. Hit is neutral, it's clean, but smashed. Smashed is a word loaded with violent, high-impact imagery. It suggests shattered glass, twisted metal, and chaos. And that single, carefully chosen word worked like a virus. The group that heard the word smashed not only estimated the car's speed as significantly higher, but a week later, they were more than twice as likely to falsely remember seeing broken glass in the video glass that was never there. The word smashed didn't just influence their opinion. It literally rewrote their memory of the event. It created a more dramatic, more violent memory than the one they had actually witnessed. This happens all the time. A detective asking an eyewitness, "Did you see the weapon in his left hand?" subtly suggests there was a weapon. A news reporter asking, "How chaotic was the protest?" plants the idea that the protest was chaotic. The leading question is a powerful tool because it disguises a statement as a question, smuggling a piece of data into your brain under the cover of a simple inquiry. The second trick in the toolkit is a form of psychological reinforcement. Let's call it the confidence boost, or the detective's nod. This technique exploits our deep-seated need for validation and certainty. As we've learned, our memories can be hazy, and our confidence in them can waver. This trick works by providing a false sense of certainty from an authority figure, which then works backward to retroactively improve the memory itself. Researchers Wells and Bradfield demonstrated this with chilling effectiveness in an eyewitness study. They had participants watch a security video of a crime. Then, they asked them to identify the gunman from a photo lineup. Here's the catch. The actual gunman wasn't in any of the photos. Every single participant, therefore, made a mistaken identification. After they made their choice, the researchers gave one group a simple piece of confirming feedback. The experimenter just said, "Good, you identified the suspect." To the other group, they said nothing. Later, all participants were asked how confident they were in their choice, how good their view of the gunman was, and how much attention they were paying at the time. The results were staggering. The group that received that simple, single sentence of validation, "Good job," rewrote their entire memory of the experience. They reported being far more confident in their choice. They remembered having a clearer view of the gunman. Here, they remembered paying closer attention to the details of his face. Their memory of their own internal state was completely distorted by that external validation. The detective's nod didn't just make them feel better about their memory. It made them believe they had a better memory to begin with. This is a terrifyingly powerful tool in police interrogations or therapeutic settings. A simple "I believe you" or "that sounds right" can transform a hesitant, vague recollection into a confident, detailed, and potentially false testimony. The third and final trick is perhaps the most insidious, because it turns your own mind against itself. We'll call it the imagination engine, or the what-if game. This technique exploits the fact that our brains have a very difficult time distinguishing between a vividly imagined event and a genuinely remembered one. Both processes are remembering the past and imagining the future activate similar neural networks. The imagination engine works by encouraging a person to repeatedly and vividly imagine a fictional event, until the boundary between imagination and memory dissolves completely. This is exactly what happened to Chris in the Lost in the Mall study. The researchers didn't just tell him a story, they instructed him to go home and think about it, to imagine it. This is a process psychologists call imagination inflation. Each time Chris sat down and tried to picture the scene in the mall, the old man, his mother's face, he was essentially running a simulation in his brain. He was generating sensory details, emotional responses, and a narrative sequence. His brain was creating a new, plausible memory trace. When he came back to the lab, his brain detected this newly created trace, K, and because it felt detailed and emotionally resonant, his lazy detective from our last episode made a critical misattribution. It mistook the familiarity of the imagination for the familiarity of a memory. Psychologist Ira Hyman demonstrated this with another clever experiment. He told college students a mix of true stories from their childhood provided by their parents and one completely false one, like accidentally spilling a punch bowl on the bride's parents at a wedding. Initially, almost no one remembered the false event. But then, he instructed one group to just think about the event. He instructed the other group to close their eyes and actively visualize it in detail. The results were clear. Group that engaged in active imagination was almost 3 times more likely to form a false memory of the event by the end of the study. The very act of painting a detailed picture in their mind's eye was enough to later convince them that the painting was, in fact, a photograph of a real event. These 3 tools, the leading question, kid, the confidence boost, and the imagination engine form the core of the magician's toolkit. They can be used independently, but they are most powerful when used together. A therapist can ask leading questions. A detective can provide confirming simple feedback, and a family member can encourage imagination. In this perfect storm of suggestion, a detailed, emotional, and utterly convincing memory can be built from nothing at all, leaving the person with a brand new piece of their past, a memory that feels completely real, but is, in fact, a story that was never theirs. We have now opened the magician's toolkit. We have seen the subtle but powerful tricks, the leading questions, the confidence boosts, the imagination engines that can be used to shape, distort, and even create a memory in someone else's mind. SPID. It's a disturbing thought, a neurological sleight of hand that feels like it should be impossible. This brings us to the most fundamental question of all. Why? Why is our brain, this magnificent supercomputer capable of calculating the movements of stars and composing symphonies, so astonishingly vulnerable to this kind of external contamination? Why is the fortress of our mind built with such an unlocked door? The answer is not because our brains are flawed or poorly designed. In fact, the vulnerability is a direct byproduct of one of memory's most incredible and essential features: its dynamism. Our memories are not static, unchanging artifacts. They are not like flies trapped in amber, perfectly preserved for all time. They are living, breathing, and constantly evolving things. This is where the most common misconception about memory lies. We tend to think of remembering as an act of playback. We imagine our brain as a vast video library, and when we want to remember something, a librarian simply finds the right tape and presses play. The memory is then projected, unchanged, onto the screen of our consciousness. But this is not how it works at all. The act of remembering is not an act of playback. It is an act of reconstruction. Every single time you recall a memory, you are not replaying an old file. You are rebuilding the entire memory from scratch. Let's use a more modern, more accurate analogy. Imagine every memory in your long-term storage is a complex Word document. Your memory of your 10th birthday is a file called birthday_v1.docx. When you recall that memory, your brain doesn't just open a read-only preview. It opens the original file, and in that very instant, it creates and saves a new version, birthday_v2.docx. This new version is a reconstruction, assembled from the original data but also influenced by your current mood, your current beliefs, and, crucially, any new information you are being exposed to at that moment. The next time you recall it, you are opening birthday_v2.docx and creating birthday_v3.docx. The memory you hold today might be birthday_v14.docx, a document that has been subtly edited, revised, and added to 14 different times without you ever seeing the track changes feature. This process is called memory rec, and it is the open door that suggestibility walks right through. When a therapist asks you a leading question, or a friend encourages you to imagine an event, they are doing it at the exact moment that you have the memory file open on your desktop. They are, in essence, leaning over your shoulder and typing a new sentence into your document before you hit save. Because the new information is added during this active, reconstructive process, it gets seamlessly woven into the fabric of the original memory. When you save birthday_v15.docx, the suggested detail is no longer an external piece of information. It is now part of the core file, an integrated piece of your personal history. It feels just as real as the original details because, neurologically, it is now stored right alongside them. So why would our brains be built with such a seemingly catastrophic security flaw? It's because this editability is also our greatest strength. This constant process of reconstruction is what allows us to learn and adapt. It's what allows us to update old information with new knowledge. When you learn a new fact that changes your understanding of a past event, your brain needs to be able to open the old memory file and add a new note. Reconsolidation is the mechanism that allows our past to remain relevant to our present. But the very same process that allows for learning and growth also creates a permanent backdoor for manipulation and suggestion. The open door that lets wisdom in is the same open door that lets lies in. This brings us back to our old friend from the last episode, the lazy detective in our frontal lobes. It is the job of this detective, our brain's executive control system, to perform source monitoring. In our document analogy, the detective is supposed to be the editor who checks the track changes. When new information is added, the detective should ask, where did this new sentence come from? Is this part of the original draft, or is this a new edit from an outside source? But as we know, our detective is overworked and loves cognitive shortcuts. When a plausible suggestion is made, one that fits the gist of the memory, the detective often fails to perform this source check. It sees the new sentence, sees that it fits the overall narrative, and just clicks accept all changes before saving the document. Let's apply this to the Lost in the Mall study. When Jim first tells Chris the story, Chris's brain opens a file called childhood_memories.docx. The document is open on the desktop of his mind. Over the next few days, Chris engages in imagination inflation. He is, in effect, typing new, fictional paragraphs into the document himself. He's adding details about the old man, the feeling of being scared. Then, when Jim asks him again, the lazy detective in Chris's brain accesses the file. It sees all this new, detailed information, because it feels emotionally resonant and fits the narrative. The detective doesn't bother to check the source. It doesn't recognize that these paragraphs were written by imagination, not by experience. It simply accepts the entire document as a true record of the past. The suggestion has become a memory. This is the anatomy of suggestibility. It is a perfect storm, a conspiracy between a brain designed to be editable and a lazy detective that fails to check the edits. It is a testament to the fact that our memories are not treasures locked in a vault, but living stories that we are constantly and often unconsciously co-authoring with the world around us. The open door in our mind is always there. The only question is who or what we allow to walk through it. This brings us back to our old friend from the last episode, the lazy detective in our frontal lobes. It is the job of this detective, our brain's executive control system, to perform source monitoring. In our document analogy, the detective is supposed to be the editor who checks the track changes. When new information is added, the detective should ask, where did this new sentence come from? Is this part of the original draft, or is this a new edit from an outside source? But as we know, our detective is overworked and loves cognitive shortcuts. When a plausible suggestion is made, one that fits the gist of the memory, the detective often fails to perform this source check. It sees the new sentence, sees that it fits the overall narrative, and just clicks accept all changes before saving the document. Let's apply this to the Lost in the Mall study. When Jim first tells Chris the story, Chris's brain opens a file called childhood_memories.docx. The document is open on the desktop of his mind. Over the next few days, Chris engages in imagination inflation. He is, in effect, typing new, fictional paragraphs into the document himself. He's adding details about the old man, the feeling of being scared. Then, when Jim asks him again, the lazy detective in Chris's brain accesses the file. It sees all this new, detailed information, because it feels emotionally resonant and fits the narrative. The detective doesn't bother to check the source. It doesn't recognize that these paragraphs were written by imagination, not by experience. It simply accepts the entire document as a true record of the past. The suggestion has become a memory. This is the anatomy of suggestibility. It is a perfect storm, a conspiracy between a brain designed to be editable and a lazy detective that fails to check the edits. It is a testament to the fact that our memories are not treasures locked in a vault, but living stories that we are constantly and often unconsciously co-authoring with the world around us. The open door in our mind is always there. The only question is who or what we allow to walk through it. So we arrive at the inevitable, practical question. If our minds are like soft clay, if our memories are editable documents with an open back door, and if the detective in our head is lazy, what can we possibly do? Are we doomed to be passive, victims of suggestion? Our personal histories constantly being rewritten by the people and the media we interact with? It's a bleak picture, but it is not the full picture. The purpose of understanding a vulnerability is not to despair over it, but to learn how to build a defense against it. You cannot change the fundamental architecture of your brain, but you can absolutely train yourself to be a more discerning, more critical, and more resilient thinker. You can't seal the open door forever. That would prevent you from learning, but you can hire a better security guard. This is the antidote to suggestibility. It is not a simple trick, but a conscious practice, a way of building a Fort Knox for your most important memories. The first and most foundational layer of this defense is something we've touched on before, but here it becomes absolutely critical. It is the conscious and deliberate act of separating the feeling from the fact. This is perhaps the most difficult mental skill to master, because it goes against our deepest intuitions. Our brains are wired to use the emotional intensity of a memory as a proxy for its accuracy. If a memory feels vivid, emotionally charged, and certain, we automatically assume it must be true. This is a dangerous cognitive shortcut. As we saw with Chris in the Lost in the Mall study, his brain generated real fear and real relief in response to a completely fake event. The emotion was authentic, but the memory was a fiction. The antidote, then, is to become a method actor of your own mind. You must learn to step back and observe your feelings about a memory as a separate event from the memory itself. When you recall something with intense certainty, you must train your inner detective to ask a new question. Am I confident because of the verifiable sensory details of the event? Or am I confident because of the strong emotion I am feeling right now as I recall it? You must learn to say, I feel very strongly that this is what happened, but I acknowledge that my feeling of certainty is not, in itself, evidence. Think of it like a movie soundtrack. A powerful, swelling orchestral score can make a cheesy scene feel epic and profound, but it doesn't change the quality of the acting or the script. You must learn to mentally mute the soundtrack of emotion and look at the raw footage of the memory itself. Does it hold up to scrutiny? Or is the emotion the only thing giving it the illusion of truth? This separation is the first line of defense against being misled by your own internal state. The second layer of defense is to become a more active and critical consumer of information. Let's call this the journalist's mandate. Question the source. Suggestibility thrives when we passively accept information without interrogating its origin or its framing. A journalist's first job is not to believe their sources, but to verify them. You must become the journalist of your own mind. This goes beyond simply asking who told me this. It's about dissecting the way you were told. You must train your brain to automatically detect the tools from the magician's toolkit. When someone asks you a question, is it a neutral inquiry, or is it a leading question planting an idea? How fast was the car going? Is a neutral question. How fast was the car going when it smashed into the pole? Is a leading one. Train yourself to spot the difference. When someone offers you validation, a detective, a therapist, a friend, is it a genuine encouragement, Or is it a confidence boost designed to shape your recollection? Be wary of anyone who seems too eager for you to be certain. And most importantly, when you are encouraged to imagine something, you must consciously label that process in your mind. You must say to yourself, I am now engaging in an act of imagination. This is a simulation. This is not a memory. By consciously tagging the source of the information as imagined, you give your lazy detective a clear evidence tag to work with later, making it far less likely that it will misfile the simulation as a real event. Finally, the ultimate defense is a long-term project. It is the act of building a resilient narrative. A mind with a strong, coherent, and well-established sense of its own history is less susceptible to suggestion than a mind with a fragmented or uncertain past. This is about actively engaging with your own life story. This is why practices like journaling are so powerful. When you write down your experiences close to when they happen, you are creating a source document, an original file that you can refer back to. You are strengthening the memory trace with rich, self-generated detail, making it more resistant to later alteration. This is also about building a strong sense of self and critical thinking. The more you know, the more you read, the more you expose yourself to different viewpoints, the harder it is for a single, simplistic suggestion to take root. A suggestion is like a single seed thrown into a garden. If the garden is empty and soil is bare, that seed can easily sprout and grow into a massive weed. But if your mind is a dense, thriving rainforest of pre-existing knowledge, complex ideas, and well-tended memories, a single foreign seed will have a much harder time finding the light it needs to grow. It will be crowded out by the strength and complexity of the existing ecosystem. Building this mental rainforest is a lifelong endeavor. It is the work of education, of curiosity, and of a commitment to intellectual rigor. It is the ultimate Fort Knox for your mind. It is not an impenetrable wall, but a living, dynamic defense system that is too rich and too complex to be easily hijacked by a simple lie. Sir, we conclude our fifth, and perhaps most unsettling, investigation. The sin of suggestibility reveals that the stories we tell ourselves about ourselves are not solo projects. They are collaborations, often with authors we did not choose and edits we did not approve. The very architecture of our memory is dynamic. Reconstructive nature leaves a permanent open door for the narratives of others to enter our own. It is a profound vulnerability, a testament to the fact that our sense of self is not a solid, unchanging monolith, but a fluid and constantly negotiated story. But with this knowledge comes power. By learning to separate our feelings from our facts, by becoming critical journalists of the information we consume, and by actively building a rich and resilient personal narrative, we can become better gatekeepers of our own minds. We cannot seal the door, but we can learn to check the identification of everyone who tries to walk through it. We can choose which stories to let in, and which to leave outside. Thank you for joining us in the lab for this exploration of the malleable mind. This is a sin that affects us all, so we have a question for you. Have you ever been convinced that memory was real, only to find out later that it was suggested to you by someone else? Share your story in the comments below. Subscribe for more deep dives into the strange and intricate machinery of what makes us human. Until next time, stay curious.